Nathan, this is exciting for me at many levels because of not only how great you are at the ownership that you have in all the music that you do, but just you're such a great guy.
Oh, bless you.
Really fantastic.
Bless you, sir.
On behalf of the Sessions, we welcome you
be
for
here.
sure. You know, there have been a variety of bass players that I have had the chance to sit down with. I'm talking Chuck Rainey, Nate Watts, Abel Boreal Sr., Jerry Jamot, Leland Sklar.
My heroes.
All of them. And when your name comes up, it's amazing the incredible respect that they have for you as peers of your instrument. This is really huge.
Oh my goodness.
Where did this begin for you to start? How did music enter your life?
Well, first of all, those names you mentioned, I mean, Chuck Rainey, I would buy a record if his name was on the back. Back in the days when you looked and saw names on the back of records, regardless of whose album it was, if Chuck Rainey was playing bass, I would buy it. You know, I mean, my hero, and those are the guys, Jerry Jamot, Leland. You know you know, when you've heard Abraham is like a mentor to me. Nate Watts, to this day, you know, those lines on these Stevie records, and they become the fabric of our existence almost. You know, and then so, you know, to kind of be in that company for me is a huge honor because I just grew up kind of studying all of the James Jamerson, and then just all the great bass players, Paul McCartney, and you name it, every bass player in every band, Jack Bruce, you know, and so these, you know, Rocco from Tower of Power, Verdine White, Earth, Wind and Fire, you know, Jocko, I mean, so you know, Larry Graham, the list is endless too, you know, of guys that have become friends, you know, Pete Cetera from Chicago, and guys that really kind of shaped what our lives are, and I've been making a list of all the songs that you can identify by the bass line, you know, and there's hundreds of them, you know, just My Girl and other. As soon as you hear two notes, you know what song it is, you know, and not musicians. We're talking about average. Every person knows what song it is. You know? So you know, I think it's a very important part of, you know, the DNA and the fabric of the music business.
So how did bass come into your life? Was that your first instrument that you were attracted to?
My first instrument was cello, actually.
Interesting.
And the way I got to cello was actually as a kid watching the Charlie Brown specials, and you know, okay, the specials were good, but the music was what drew me in. Vince Guaraldi, Guaraldi Trio, and it just. As a kid, I'm just listening, 11 years old, 10, 11, and how cool is that music, you know? And how do you? And I just wanted to get inside the TV and figure out how do I do that, you know? And so piano was the primary instrument. When I went to my junior high school, I wanted to play piano. Well, you can't. All we have is orchestral instruments, you know, violin, viola, cello, bass. Actually, the string instruments were the only ones available. So bass was a little big. I was a little guy. Violin, viola were kind of small. So cello. You know, so I played cello for 3 years, and that's where I got my, you know, chops for reading bass clef. And but then later on in the church, I was tagging along with my brothers who were playing at the, you know, like the folk and jazz masses in San Diego, and there was a bass on the altar, and I looked and saw this thing, picked it up, and as soon as I picked it up, it was just like, you know, it found me and I found it. You know, 14 years old, and that was it. End of story.
And then listening to records was a part of it, so that all these bass players that you mentioned, you had the option of knowing who they were in the back of those recordings. That's a powerful tool that happened. It's not so much now that the listing of the musicians are on these recordings.
Yeah, I mean, you know, back when records and albums, so you had this big physical unit that you could read, and there were tons of notes on the back, you know. So that was equally as exciting as listening to the music, you know, just reading, you know, okay, who's playing on this? And first thing I would do is my ear just went to the bass, you know. So okay, who's this? Okay, James Jamerson again. Who's Chuck Rainey again, you know. Whether it's Quincy Jones albums or Cream. You know, I was looking in the back. Oh, Jack Bruce, this guy is good, you know. And then, you know, of course, you had the record player in the room and just put the needle back and just play it over and over again and learn those lines.
Boy, those old school, picking the needle up
and
school, shipping it away, that was really old school. But you worked hard for that knowledge. So it seemed like years ago, because we had to work harder for the knowledge, we retained it more.
Right.
Because we had to work for it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we were hungrier. A group of us used to get together and we'd crack an album over, okay, Miles Davis, you know, and we'd study the back, and okay, Ron Carter's on the Herbie Hancock, and we talk about it and talk about, wow, what it must have been like when those guys went to record it. And so it was kind of, as young teenagers, we were kind of hungry for this knowledge about what was going on in this powerful music, situation.
Boy, the word hunger, that really is the key aspect of where your passion was driving you to the music.
Right.
Relentlessly is what it was. So I mean, did you find, was there a base teacher? Did you have any formal studying? Were there books that you went through? How did you develop your?
Well, you tried to grab everything that you could. When I was in high school, we had a great, Dennis Foster was the band leader, the professor there, and he had all of his students went on to become solo artists, and they all won solo awards in high school. And in Crawford High School in San Diego just had a pile of great musicians, So he says I was lucky because I had good students, but the students say we were lucky because we had him, And then I went on to study music at UC San Diego, and so Bert Turetsky was the contrabass instructor there, who really had another great stable of musicians, and Cecil Lytle was also one of my instructors, who was a jazz study, jazz and African rhythms, and I was in the gospel choir with him. So UCSD was a great place for me to get my reading chops, classical, and just overall music education.
So where did your versatility of the amount of genres that you play, from everyone, Streisand, Andre Bocelli, to Daft Punk, I mean, you really have this incredible span. Where'd that come from?
Well, I would have to say, again, the eclectic record collection that my parents had. He had Barbra Streisand, and Tommy Tedesco, I remember, Wes Montgomery, and so these records, we listen to it, and they just get into your system, like that's all there was to listen to. Next thing you know, Gladys Knight, and you're listening to Temptations and the Motown stuff, but it was really pretty eclectic, from classical and A to Z.
Yeah. So from where, now you're learning the instrument, where did that go into this professional field where all of a sudden now you were booking yourself and playing in a variety of different bands? How did that come about, where you turned this into a business, is really what it was?
Right, well, as a teenager in San Diego too, we played in a lot of the clubs. There was the Crossroads downtown where a lot of jazz gigs, a lot of great musicians were coming through there. So if you could get a gig there, it was kind of like it took you to another level. And then I just started playing in top 40 bands, So then we were at all the hotels around town. So just making the rounds around town, and then I got to realize, okay, the pop gigs, they kind of pay more than the jazz gigs, and then you started to get a feel of. But then the jazz gigs, you were more progressive, and you dig in a little deeper, you got a feel of a little bit of the business. And then as I started my master's program, Bert Turetsky, his advice was move to LA and make money. You go in there and you're ready to hit the scene, So I moved to LA in 1980, and I remember my first session with Gene Page, January 2nd, 1980. I looked over, there was Ray Parker on guitar, and Wawa was over there, and Sonny Burke was on keyboards, and James Gatson on drums, and I'm looking up there going, and I wrote everything in my diary, all the guys, and from then on, I was working every day, pretty much.
How amazing!
I started doing the Barry White records.
That's right. Barry White was next. Yeah, at that point. And how was it like? I mean, you had listened to a lot of these musicians. How was it like? All of a sudden, now you're in the studio with these guys.
It's unbelievable. Because Lee Ritenour, again, their music had made its way, and so we had the albums. And who's this? And Larry Carlton and all these great guys. So. Next thing you know, you're in the studio and looking across the room, and there's there's Lee Ritenour, and I'm just going, wow, And those guys were really great too, because they had really honed the business aspect too, and they everybody takes you under their wing, teach you how to fill out a W-4 form, and I'll never forget because then some of the guys, were double scale and triple scale. So when you start working so much that more people want you at the same time, then your rates have to go up, because then you're saying, oh, well, if he wants me and he wants me,
Supply and demand.
Supply and demand.
Like, as in any business.
So it's fantastic. So you looked at them, some of the guys were writing triple scale on their thing, because they were in complete demand. Hal Blaine, they used to keep his drums at 3 different studios, And so that was the kind of like the the learning, where they took you under the wing and you kind of learn what scales are about.
So at that time in the 80s, I mean, where the world was at, so you had to sharpen your business skills, because to be on time, you're always on time, you're always top professional, you are such a seasoned pro in this.
You have your gear in good shape, strings, you don't want to get flapping with the chords buzzing, you're in the studio, so this is like the highest level that you can be, so you want to keep everything on that, you keep your A game up.
Absolutely. So you work with these musicians, you have this whole network happening, you're building it up. Where, you've gone on to to build this to such a level, and you're not stopping at all. You're totally flourishing even more. Is there a format that you use where you wake up and you look at your computer, or you have any kind of a formula that you use for all this? How do you balance this?
Well, first of all, when I wake up, I am so grateful. The first thing I do is just say my prayers of thanks. Because first I got up this morning. So
I'm with you on
that's
that,
the good news. And the next thing is just you don't have to do a few things you're grateful for before you realize that now that I'm up, I'm guess what? I get to go do what I absolutely love to do. This is my job. And in music, nobody's following you around with a pension plan, so that's a good little incentive to get up and hit it really hard too.
And, so you've had to develop your own pension plan, your own concepts of how you secure yourself and your family. You've had to put
and
it all
your
together.
family, yep, the whole thing, and it starts with with you. Nobody else can do that kind of stuff for you. I get up and I do my 30 minutes of meditation in the morning, just to clear my brain and get ready for what's coming. And LA back then, there was a studio. You couldn't throw a rock without hitting a studio. If you stood on Sunset Boulevard, Record Plant and Capitol and all these places, United, and they were just one right after another down the street. And not only were there was sessions were in there, orchestras, the Jacksons would be Jackson 5 and 1, and Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones would be another one. People would Capitol, and Lionel Richie. I remember the days of those kind of sessions were just 3-4 sessions a day, 5 days a week, 5-6 days a week, just running from studio to studio.
So the industry's changed.
Industry's changed
Dramatically in what it was. So how do you adapt to the change? How have you made it work and continued at this pace?
You're always going to have to look up and say, if I could look into the future, what would it show me? And you look at the CD. It came and went in our lifetime. Back when we started, vinyl was still pretty popular. Absolutely. So, so I was able to get in the vinyl world and then the CD world, which they were selling millions and millions of CDs. We did. In the early 90s, we did Eric Clapton Unplugged. I think it sold like 28-30 million CDs or albums or cassettes. But physical units, which you'd never hear of that again. Those kind of numbers, Michael Jackson, and 30 million, The Bodyguard, 35 million,
totally.
That's like physical units.
Totally.
So fortunately, being in that kind of heyday, there was a lot of hay, and a lot to go around. So everybody was making money. You saw guys driving around the Ferraris and pulling up, and the studio lots would just look like an expensive car. You'd see Lamborghinis and Mercedes, and it was kind of crazy.
What a time!
Yeah, fantastic time.
But now the album that you have out, Nathan East, which I thought was fantastic. I downloaded that, so I had that on my phone. I've got that on my devices, and it's fantastic because it really seems to be you. You captured you in this recording.
When I went to make a record, I said, what would I want to hear, and what would my playlist be? And this is kind of like a peek into my life, the soundtrack of my life. So, it is a little bit all over the place, but of course I think there's only two kinds of music, good music and the other kind, right? So, and when I was a kid buying records, Herbie Hancock, Headhunters, and Miles Davis, Wes Montgomery, but then I had Earth, Wind and Fire, Tower Power, Chicago, Blood, Sweat and Tears. So my collection was all over Rachmaninoff, and so when I play music, I don't think about, I only can play one style. I mean, I'm kind of, and I think that's kept me going as well, because you can get a call to play on a rock and roll project, or an R&B or a jazz project. Recently I worked with Chick Corea, which was the most challenging gig I've ever done. I had due respect for John Patitucci and these lines that that the guys play. And then I bounced back and forth with Foreplay, with Bob James and Harvey Mason, and Chuck Loeb in there, some with comrades that I've respected and loved their music for years.
Oh man, I had a chance of playing with Chuck Loeb many years ago. Just what a seasoned musician. Of course, Harvey Mason is just an absolute legend. So working with these guys, I mean, you're in this circle of great artists here in the 21st century that is so empowering. Is there any one person that stands out that has been maybe a mentor to you? And and who was that mentor? And what do you think they saw in you?
Oh my goodness. Well, I look back and I think about, first of all, the people I mentioned from school, Dennis Foster, Bert Turetsky from UCSD, Cecil Lytle, UC San Diego, who to this day, I can call them up and we remain friends. And if I needed any advice or anything, I could call these guys still. But then I started to look, and success leaves clues. So all the people I started to work with, David Foster and Quincy Jones, these people who really, they take you under their wing as well, And so I looked to them as role models. Eric Clapton, who I've worked with over 30 years, great role model. You look up and everything he's been through, to see how he handles it, and to see to this day, the guy can just wake up and, okay, I want to do a show. Okay, book 2 Madison Square Gardens.
Absolutely, sell it out.
And
exactly right.
Last month alone, I was looking at my book. I was in 5 different countries. I worked, I did my shows in Japan and Korea. And then I went over and did Chick Corea's shows in Jakarta, and in Indonesia we did Jakarta Jazz Festival. Then a week later I came home, and within 6 days I was in New York rehearsing with Eric Clapton, 2 Madison Square Gardens, and within a week from that I was on the East Coast with Foreplay doing some shows. So I looked at the book and I said, man, I've just done like 4 different, completely different shows and artists in a month.
In many different countries.
In many different countries, So if I look a little jet lagged.
No, you look great. But that's an interesting line that you say, success leaves clues.
Absolutely. I mean, and if you look at anybody successful and study them, okay, what are the common traits that they have,
Right.
The biggest thing that I see is most of the people are just the nicest people you ever want to work with, generous, giving, they listen. And so all of that is kind of like being put out there for those that are coming through the path. I met this guy, he introduced me to this guy, now he introduced me to this guy.
So that networking and plan, you still continue that today. It's really about that message that they can see on how they can map out and plan their career in the changing tides of the music industry. It's going to continue to change even as it is now. So it's adapting to that change, but it seems like you have constantly and always be driven by passion. You are like that's your driving force.
Yeah, that should be the only reason, because anything else is going to take you away from it. If you're doing it for the money, then you're already starting it behind, or for the fame or whatever. But if you're doing it for the passion, that you could, if all else fails, you would go walk over to that piano and sit down and practice, then you know that you love doing it.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't matter, Now, as far as your income and your job, you may have to say, okay, I either got to be real clever about how I, turn this into something. That means being a great songwriter, or, composer for films or whatever it is. But then that's going to be, or maybe I'm going to go to school and study business or some type of thing that's going to help me with the business aspect of music.
J.R. Robinson, a dear friend and a phenomenal drummer and musician himself, he said to me one day, he goes, when Nathan shows up, I know it's going to be a great gig.
Oh.
Your reputation really precedes you in the fact that they know when you come in, your positive attitude, the way you just, how you see things and how you welcome challenges in your life, in such a wonderful, healthy way. That feeds other people to lift their game. That's powerful that you do that.
Well, again, you look at a Quincy Jones. When he's in the room, everybody's game goes up. And I studied early on. I love studying people. And I go in these sessions, and you look. It's a Michael Jackson session with Quincy Jones, David Foster, David Page, Jerry Hay, the John Robinson, Jeff Porcaro, Luca, the cream of the cream of the crop, all in the room, and all on their A game, because Quincy Jones is the, he's the orchestrator of, he cast this incredible session. And just because of that, Dave Foster walks over the piano and comes up with an intro that you'll hear, just because you're in a room where the standard is set so high, So I learned early on about standards, and just I can remember reading an article that Quincy wrote. He said, I'd rather have a guy that's a great guy in the studio and not such a great player, but he's a better guy than a guy who's a great player, but he's a jerk, and a diva.
Difficult to work with.
No room for divas in the Quincy Jones studio.
When you're in the presence with Quincy, and I used to hear him as a trumpet player years ago, in New York, playing and playing his tail off,
Amazing.
And then for what he has built in his career, it's been an amazing journey. But to work with him and to be in that presence must really be, out of this world.
It's beyond anything, because of the way he commands it. He's like a chef, master chef, master orchestrator. His way with people, you've never seen anything like it. Mild-mannered, you always feel comfortable. And can you imagine, you're doing these records that are going to be heard by 1 billion people, and they're going to go out to the world, and he's just sitting there in there calm, and everybody's having a good time. But you do realize that the standard starts way up high.
The bar is high.
The bar is very high.
You got to come ready to play that game.
Right. There's very few times where people are in there scuffling trying to make it happen.
But you prepared yourself. Your preparation, and when you go to each session, you are mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally prepared. That's something which is really rare. How do you balance all that? And you've got a family and what you're doing. So how do you make all that work?
Yeah, well, balance is another thing that I study and try to implement in my life, because without balance, and by studying people, a guy could be very, very successful over here, but he's got no personal life, or he's driven so much over here that this aspect of his life has really suffered. And so I look at all those things and I say, I'd like to get all of those things ducks in a row, but music is a very spiritual endeavor as far as I'm concerned. You can't put your finger on why you play a note, and that note, the vibration of that note touches somebody's heart in a way that you just can't explain. So that's a spirit associated. So every time I'm on the way, I'm praying, and I'm praying for this kind of guidance and this intangible thing that we can't touch or feel, but I pray for that to come into every muscle and fiber of my body, before I go in there, and then really, you walk into that room, you don't know what mood people are going to be in, but you want it to be up, when Jeff Porcaro and I used to we'd walk in the studio, we'd just instantly start laughing, because we knew we're not going to go to work today, this is just going to be fun, and same with JR, and a lot of people that have the same sort of spirit and energy when they go to make music. They leave the baggage, like Quincy used to say, leave your ego at the door. But you leave whatever has happened. If you had a flat tire, whatever it is, you come in there, and this is a privilege and an honor to be in this one special sanctuary, where this music is going to be made.
I met Jeff Porcaro in 1976.
Oh my goodness!
There's not a soul that every day doesn't go by that he continues to influence people, even though he's not physically here. To work with him and to be a part of that mystique of his groove of what he did, what a magical person, right?
Unbelievable. I talk to Joe Porcaro and just say, God bless you, for you delivered some of the most incredible and important musicians. And Jeff was one of those guys that he was just so generous, and as a person, forget about his drumming, the most amazing, the best drummer, the best feel. Talk about the spirit you can't put your finger to it. When he played, nobody played like that.
You felt it.
But leave that behind. He was the nicest guy you ever met. He referred me to so many gigs.
And a prince,
And a prince, a true gentleman. And I think about him every day. I miss him dearly. And again, his impact on the world is still grows.
Still continues. It's amazing.
Still continues.
But you have totally. You mentioned about about your prayers. Well, your prayers are being answered, and they're being heard loud and clear because it's working beautifully for you. In closing, I mean, we have these generations of viewers, of musicians who are going to be passionate in their own right, and they're looking for direction. So a part of these conversations that we're having is to give them the information on how you achieved your level of success, but you've done it in a way that has been so honest and pure, which has been absolutely clear in every recording that you've done and every performance that you've done. What would you say to this next generation? And as they watch this for generations, even when we're long gone,
right.
Nathan, what can you say to them that could give them hope for them being able to achieve what they want in music?
Yeah, well, even on my online school of electric bass, where students send me videos and they play, when you hear hundreds of students playing the same thing, you can tell who has the passion,
Right.
And so my advice is always make every note count, Don't just, I'm just going to play this whole song, but every note's got to, James Jamerson, every note should have something on it, whether it's a slide into it or a little twirl or a trill or something, and so don't waste any notes because we only get, they're gifts, we get them and then we give them, so my advice is always make every single note count and then listen, a lot of times you can practice something in your room and you come down to play it with everybody, but you have to listen to see how it's going to integrate with what's going on. So don't just practice with, play what you practice. Come down and listen and have the dialogue, have the conversation with the other musicians. And most of all, like we said earlier, it just has to be passion from the heart. It has to be realizing that music is a gift and what we do with it is our gift.
Yeah. With some of the young students that you see, is there anyone that steps out that are you hopeful where the next generation is in playing bass and playing music?
Oh my goodness, when I go on YouTube, I'm getting my mind blown every day. There's just so many. Jacob Collier has been doing some amazing things, not only musically, but with the videos that he makes. He has all these great videos, and then of course, Esperanza Spalding, I keep forgetting how young she is
how wonderful
and how
an
amazing
artist.
she
Wonderful
is.
An artist. And she sings. Phenomenal on top of all that, yeah.
Like an angel.
Yeah.
And so we've worked together. I go on YouTube and some of these kids are, and great time and you can tell, you can look at you can look at kind of the expression on their face and know that they really enjoy it from within,
How absolutely wonderful. If there's ever anybody that is passionate and spiritual and a driving force in the industry, Nathan, you are that person. You really
Oh, thank you, Will.
You have done amazing. You continue at that pace. You are changing lives, and you are really setting the standard in the industry to a higher level where, for everyone, even non-bass players, are able to hear you perform and know they have to raise their game. So that is fantastic.
Well, thank you. I mean, I feel very blessed, very fortunate to get to do what I do, which is play music, and that's what I do for a living. That's the only thing I've ever done. That's the only thing I know, that I can be employed, and it's just for me, it's a huge blessing, and I always pray that it continues on and on.
Your prayers will be heard, that's for sure. They will be heard, your prayers. Thank you so much. On behalf of the sessions, Nathan, you are an absolute gem, man.
It's
Thank you
a pleasure.
so much.
Thank you.